Welcome back. So this is our video to start testing some of this hardware. I believe we're looking at episode 6 here. In the last video, we tore one of these guys all the way down, and I'm actually testing a new microphone in this video. We'll see if the sound is better after the debacle with the audio and that last one. I sure hope this fixes the audio problems. That was a real pain in the ass doing voiceover. Instead of just simply recording as I'm playing with this stuff. So yeah, the last video we tore one of these things down, actually this very one, to the point where it's at right now. So still a few parts here left inside, but we'll get to that later. So what have I got here on this table that I've set up next to the cabinet? This is a PCB, a working PCB. At least it was working when I actually had one of these things that was up and running. And I believe this one is Mighty Bomb Jack and Excitebike. So all I've done is I've taken the PCB, I slid it into the wooden and metal bracket that it actually sits inside the cabinet in, just so that it stays off the table. You don't want the solder side of these boards just resting on the table. I mean, you know, stuff could short out, or you know, who knows. Either way, these little carrier guys, they work great just to give these things a little bit of space. So I've got that set up, and I've plugged the harness, just the naked harness here. So this is basically the entire harness. I've got it just plugged into the board, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a little test bench, and I'm going to run through and test each of the harnesses that I've got, each of the power supplies that I've got, each of the isolation transformers that I've got, and the monitors. Now I'm not going to make you sit through, not that I make you do anything, but I'm not going to have you sit through me doing all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get one of these things up and running, test the harness, show you how I'm going to be doing the testing. If I run into any problems with components as I go along here, I'll show you what I plan to do. If everything goes smoothly, then I'll show you what I'd plan to do if something went bad. You know, if the harness is bad, or God forbid the board's bad. Like I said, the board should be working, but who knows. Power supply, isolation transformer. If something is going bad, then you know, I'll need to test it out with some other parts that I've got, and then figure out a plan for what I'm going to do for replacing that. So without a further ado, let's get this harness plugged in. Now, I have not marked these yet. I know the harness pretty well. It's really, as you can see here, it's really not that complicated. There's really not much to it. A lot of Molex connectors, but this is going to two different sides. So you've got two sets, for example, which are bundled together. Two sets of connectors for your control panels. We've got, obviously, the two connectors that go into the PCB. I believe this one goes to the test switch and the coin door counter. This one goes to the coin door itself, so there's going to be two of those. This one goes to the power supply. So, I mean, there's two of everything. So it's actually pretty easy to figure out, when you've got two of everything, you know, where things are supposed to go. And once I get to the point where I'm actually at reassembly, since I'm actually not entirely sure, for example, this connector here, which is a long piece, this goes to a control panel. Well, I'm pretty sure this is going to be the player 2 side control panel, and this shorter one closer to the actual board is going to be the player 1 side. I mean, that makes sense, but I'm not sure. So until I get to the point where I'm positive, I'm not going to mark these things, but I will label them before I'm done. You know, so if I have to work on this thing again in the future, if it's in my arcade, or if someone buys, excuse me, if someone buys one of these from me, you know, they'll pull a harness apart that'll be nice and neatly marked. That's just it's a real simple thing I can do. It helps me for reassembly anyway, so hopefully that'll help someone in the future. So without further ado, let's get some of this connected. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up the monitor, get it up here on the bench. Once again, picking up the monitor by its frame, being very, very careful. All right. Monitor, if we remember correctly from the disassembly videos, we've got 4 connections on the monitor. One is this plug right here. That goes into the isolation transformer. We'll get into how we're going to plug that stuff in the inside in just a minute. Then on the back side, we've got 2 connectors. One's going to be for video, one's going to be for ground. So these are actually, looks like this is going to be the player 1 side. These are the monitor connectors right here. You can see it's a Molex connector 2-pin and they're keyed. So plug that one in correctly. Same thing with this guy, 4-pin keyed. And since those are done, that's pretty convenient. Set that just off to the side so it's out of the way. Make sure it's make sure nothing is resting on the PCB. Make sure this is just clear here. Let's look at the rest of our connectors. We've got this one, which like I said, I'm almost positive that one goes to the coin door, so I'm just going to set this one aside. I've got a 9-pin here, which I'm pretty sure goes to the power supply, so I'm going to rest that one inside of the cabinet. Then I've got these 2 here. Both of those are for the control panels. I can actually just set those completely aside for now. So I need to get everything else working before I worry about that. Then we've got, this is going to be video for the other side, so another 6-pin and 2-pin. And then this is going to be the coin door for the other side. So these ones, I do need the coin, actually I do need the coin door. No, you know what, I'll use test switches rather than using the coin door switches. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. But I'll set that, actually that's fine, aside right there. So I don't need actually any of this. This is all just, can just hang out. We'll test the other side of the board by plugging these ones into the monitor, but for now, gotta make sure the monitor works, the board works, and all the rest of this stuff inside here works. So inside the cabinet, we've got this connector here. So this is that 9-pin. That one goes to the power supply. Power supply right there. Isolation transformer here. I'm just going to triple check we are not plugged in. So before you monkey with any of this stuff, make sure you're sure that nothing is plugged in. The isolation transformer has 2 wires on a 3-pin connector that also goes into the power supply, so that can get plugged in. And then we've got that just standard plug for the monitor. I'm going to plug that into the isolation transformer. That should be good. The monitor, another one of the connections it has, this is the sound. And I'm just going to plug it into this speaker here because it's convenient. Oh, that's tight. Let me scoot the monitor over just a wee bit. Actually, I'll move the whole table over. Is that enough? That's enough. These are keyed as well, so red to red, white to white, but it's also the Molex connector itself is keyed, so if you're having to push too hard, you're not plugging it in correctly. So that's plugged in. So monitor, 1, 2, 3, 4 connections done. Isolation transformer has a ground connected to the chassis, which is done. Connection there is good. Monitor's plugged in. Board's plugged in. So that should be good. Let's kick the camera and give this a try. So all plugged in here. Flip of the power switch. Hopefully we'll see some activity. Well, wow, I'm not sure if that picked up with the microphone being so close to me. Something in here is humming, so it's either the isolation transformer or the power supply. I'm actually going to take a wild guess that it's the power supply. This is one of the originals, and it's probably That's probably the problem. You know, I have another one right here. This is actually one of the originals as well. And this one, I believe, is the one that I pulled out of my, oops. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting blue tape on these guys so that I can mark them. You can see I put blue tape on this one, so I can mark whether these things are working or not. These are original power supplies. You know, I may just replace them anyway, even if they work. It does mean that you will lose the coin counter, so technically it's not fully restored. But one could, if someone wanted to go and put a working one of these things back in here, they could. You know, I mean, if it's working, I'll probably stick with it. But I'll have to double check and find out how much these things are going to cost. For now, let's just go ahead and disconnect. Let's disconnect mains first. So then let's disconnect this power supply. You know, these also should be rebuildable. I'll have to look into that too. I only have two. Truth be told, you know, so I've got four cabinets to build here, and if I do the PC-10 conversion on one of these cabinets, then I'm going to need another power supply. That'd be 5 in total, and I only actually have 2 original power supplies here. So I mean, you know, we'll see. I'll look into rebuilding these things too. It would be nice to keep them original. I do like to keep them original, but at the same time, if I'm selling it on to someone else, there's also a certain part of me that says, you know, make sure that this thing's going to be working for him. You know, I don't want him to have problems with it. Anyway, so let's plug this guy in. And that's just going to rest in there, not touching anything else. Reconnect some mains here. Flip the switch. If we hear the hum this time, it'll be the isolation transformer, not the power supply. But I have no hum, and I heard a little crackle from the monitor. And what do you know? We have Excitebike. You know, just for grins here. So that power supply is bad. It needs to be rebuilt at least, rebuilt or replaced at this point. So theoretically, I still have 2 of these control panels that I have not disassembled yet, and we're thinking this is probably going to be, did I decide player 2 side? Let's see if that theory is correct. And I also need, plug in a test switch here. Grabbing a test switch out of the chassis here. Nope, it's not that side. There we are. Credit it up. The sound is really quiet. That could very well be the monitor. You know, actually, while I've got it running here, since I'm also testing monitors, I'm going to go ahead and put a check mark on that one to let me know that that's working. I can also put a check mark on power supply, actually all the components I'm testing, and the isolation transformer. So all those get little check marks. Obviously the board's working too, but I'm going to continue using that one as a test since it is working. All right, so probably can't hear the sound. I think Excitebike is this side. Yeah. And look at that. Yeah. Sweet. But that is not, we're not here to watch me play Excitebike. All right, so that's awesome. That's great. Let's get the other side tested real quick. So I'm going to power everything down. Disconnect the mains again. Not that I'm going to be monkeying with anything high voltage here, but still, just be on the safe side. All right, so that is Excitebike on that side. So I'll swap the control panel over to the other side. Don't need that for now. We'll need to move the test switch over to this side too. Okay, let me just grab another test switch real quick. I have a pile of them after all. So you can see here, I mean, really the point of this is I want to make sure that basically when I've got all this stuff off to paint, I want to know what I need to work on so that when I get the bodies back, I can move as quickly as I can to get these things put back together. So testing the monitors, I'm going to be rebuilding. I think I'm going to recap at least all of these monitors, and we'll see about the flybacks and how they're performing. But I'm going to recap all of them at least. This one, obviously, the sound section. I should check the volume too. That's kind of stupid, silly. It'd be funny if it was just a volume problem. It's Coindor. That's Coindor. And so we've got those same connectors for the monitor, 6-pin, 2-pin. So to swap that to the other side, just swap in the video and ground cables to the other side. Make sure nothing's on the board. All right. That's all reconnected. So let's go ahead and reconnect the mains and fire this baby up. And hopefully, I think it's Mighty Bomb Jack. Let's see if that's what we see over here. Ta-da! So credit that one up. Credit's working great. Player one starts. So that's fantastic. So I have a fully working, at least fully functional. Everything's not totally working. Like I said, the sound is kind of jacked up, but yeah, fully testing, working thing here. Actually, yeah, I mean, the monitor needs some adjustments. I should check that the sound. The nice thing about these guys, because I mean, most monitors, these older monitors, you got to do most of the adjustments from the back. The nice thing about these guys, because it's almost impossible to get at the back, so they were clever enough when they designed this thing to put the pots for the horizontal hold, sound, brightness, so the sound's gonna be the volume, brightness, horizontal center, vertical hold, and vertical size, all here along the front, which that makes it so much easier than I mean, you'd have to pull the monitor out and do something, maybe not quite as drastic as this, but something basically like this to dial these things in and adjust them if you had to play with them on the side. So that's great. Let me double check the sound here. And for adjusting these pots, I actually use pretty much anytime I'm adjusting pots, especially on a live chassis or a live board. I use these, they're television adjustment tools. This is just plastic, so I'm not getting a screwdriver in here. There are certain risks to that. It's better to use these. They're cheap. I get them on Amazon, I think, is where I found them, and you get a whole series of them. This is the one that I end up using the most for adjusting pots, because it's basically just a little screwdriver. And you know, it's safest, and why take the risk for a couple of dollars? You get the right tool for the job. So I'm just adjusting that sound pot, and it is all the way up already. And I do hear the sound turning off when I adjust it all the way down. So the pot might be bad. The sound section of this monitor might be bad. Either way, something here to work on. But basically functioning. So that's fantastic. So this is what I'm going to do. You saw me, all right, so I ran into a problem with the power supply, so I ended up having to swap in a different power supply. Now I know that I've got the basic components working. I can now swap out a single component, a new monitor, a new isolation transformer, a new power supply, a new board if I was testing boards here, control panels if I were testing those. And I could run through each one, and that way I've limited the variables so that basically if something shows up as being wrong, I know what's wrong. Very straightforward. Maybe this is going to be a short video, since watching me test the rest of these things. I've got 7 monitors in total, 5 harnesses including the PC10, several, 3 isolation transformers, 3 power supplies. You know, maybe I'll show you real quick. There is this. So this is what happens when you replace a power supply in one of these with a newer one. This is a newer power supply. This was in the PC10, and so this harness that's actually connected here is part of the PC10 harness. So that one was actually running. So that conversion requires that you run 2 power supplies, one for each board, one for the PC10 board, and one for your Versus boards. So this one, yeah, they for some reason the kit would have come with a brand new Nintendo power supply. So at some point they decided they needed to kill this thing. At some point they decided to either that power supply went bad, or they just decided they liked this one better. I mean, who knows, whatever, they used it somewhere else. So yeah, so this is a Peter Chow power supply here, pretty standard. And again, the one thing that this is not going to have is that 24 volts that really, on these cabinets at least, it just runs the coin counter. So that was done, and apparently they weren't counting the coin counter with this thing if this was on location like this. Presumably it was. So anyway, so eventually, when this was originally, when they bought this kit, these connections over here, those were all in that 9-pin, I think it was, that 9-pin Molex connector. And so they cut that connector off and then wired this thing up in here. Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. I mean, you can replace the Molex connector, if you wanted to. If you've got an original power supply and wanted to put it in here, there's no reason why you couldn't do that. These two go back to the isolation transformer for power. So there's a connector here, a little 4-pin that's actually only 2 being used, and that goes into a second connector, which then goes into 2 bare wires, which you wire into the isolation transformer, and that's just for the PC10 conversion. This isn't part of the regular Versus setup. Yeah, so there's no reason why you can't wire them this way. And I went ahead and when I was before I pulled it out of the cabinet, I wanted to mark these things. So I just have some basic blue flag, painter's tape, and then I marked them with the field ground 12 volts, plus 12, the -5, and the +5, just so and the ground, so I knew which ones these were, so I didn't have to look at the wiring harness later. So there's no reason why you can't, functionally, there's no reason whatsoever why you can't just simply, put one of these things in there. And I may, like I said, I may have to fall back to doing that. We'll see. I'll have to do some research and find out what the deal is with these power supplies. And maybe they're cheap. Maybe these power supplies, maybe I can get them for like these is a good power supply. It's going to run you about $20 or so. I mean, if I can get an original for something reasonable, or find rebuild kits for these things, or figure out not necessarily rebuild kits, because I doubt there's a kit out there for it, but find someone who's done rebuilds on these things so that I can get the correct components to be able to swap those out, then, you know, I'll think about doing that. I like that idea. But I wanted to show you the test bench. This, once I get done with the testing, everything that I've got to do here, I will shoot another probably very brief video of me finishing tearing down the inside of one of these guys, the last parts here, which really is just removing the isolation transformer, the power supply, the other two test switches, the batteries, and the power cord. That's really about all there is to it. This maybe that's not exciting enough to shoot, but you know, maybe I'll shoot it and just throw it up there. You can always skip it. Anyway, thanks again for watching. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, please feel free to ask. I think I'm up to 11 subscribers. That's pretty awesome that there's actually 11 of you out there who want to see this stuff. That's fantastic. That hopefully you like it. And that'll do me. Thanks a lot again, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.